You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. In the tapestry of ancient Greek history, the word tyrant does not always carry the dark and oppressive meaning it does today. In its earliest use, the Greek term tyrannos described a ruler who came to power outside the traditional constitutional framework, often bypassing hereditary monarchy or elected magistracies. These were not necessarily despots in the modern sense, though some certainly became cruel. Rather, tyrants were frequently charismatic leaders who leveraged popular support, military strength, and political opportunity to seize control of a polis. The rise of tyrants was a recurring phenomenon in archaic and early classical Greece, particularly between the 7th and 6th centuries BC, when city-states were undergoing rapid changes in social, economic, and military structures. The roots of tyranny lay in the transformation of the Greek world after the so-called Dark Age. Population growth, agricultural expansion, and the emergence of new trade routes created both wealth and inequality. Aristocratic elites, entrenched in power through land ownership and lineage, dominated the political sphere, often monopolizing offices and excluding wider citizen participation. This generated tension with the growing class of hoplite farmers, merchants, and artisans, whose military contributions and economic importance demanded recognition. Tyrants often emerged from these tensions, presenting themselves as champions of the common people against entrenched aristocracies. Yet their path to power was rarely purely ideological. It was opportunistic, tied to the instability that plagued many polis in the period. One of the earliest and most famous examples was Cypselus of Corinth, who overthrew the ruling Bacchiad aristocracy around 657 BC. Corinth had grown rich through trade and pottery exports, but this wealth was concentrated in a few noble families. Cypselus, himself of mixed noble and common heritage, capitalized on public dissatisfaction. He reportedly ruled without a bodyguard and with broad public support, redistributing land and promoting economic activity. His son Periander, however, demonstrated the more oppressive side of tyranny, centralizing power, controlling trade routes, and according to later tradition, ruling with a heavy hand despite also overseeing cultural flourishing. In Athens, the story of tyranny takes a distinctive turn. The most famous Athenian tyrant, Pisistratus, came to power in 561 BC by playing on factional divisions within the city. Athens at the time was split among the coastal, inland, and urban parties, each with different economic interests. Pisistratus, a military hero from the coastal region, used a staged attack on himself to justify forming a bodyguard, which he then used to seize the Acropolis. Though driven out twice, he regained power and ruled until his death in 527 BC, fostering public works, festivals, and the codification of Homeric texts. Under his tyranny, Athens prospered and the groundwork was laid for its later democracy. His sons Hippias and Hipparchus continued his policies until Hipparchus was assassinated in 514 BC, an event that began the unraveling of their regime. Hippias became increasingly paranoid and repressive until Spartan intervention restored aristocratic rule. Tyrannies also flourished outside the mainland. On the island of Samos, Polycrates seized power around 538 BC and turned his small polis into a naval power, dominating the Aegean Sea through piracy, alliances, and control of trade. Polycrates cultivated cultural prestige by patronizing poets and craftsmen, but his ruthless ambition made him enemies among both Greeks and Persians. Eventually, he was lured to the mainland by the Persian satrap Oroets and executed, a reminder that the life of a tyrant was as precarious as it was powerful. In Sicily, where Greek colonies contended with native populations and rival city-states, tyranny became almost a standard form of government. Leaders like Galon of Syracuse in the early 5th century BC consolidated vast power not only within their own cities but over neighboring territories. Galon defeated the Carthaginians at Himera in 480 BC, securing his place as a savior of the Greek West, though his dominance was built on force and political manipulation. Sicilian tyrannies were often deeply militarized due to the constant threat from Carthage and internal revolts, leading to a style of rule where personal authority and military success were intertwined. Tyrants typically legitimized their rule through both populist measures and displays of wealth and power. They might cancel debts, redistribute land, expand citizen privileges, or sponsor major building projects and religious festivals. Such acts bound them to the populace and created a base of loyalty independent of aristocratic elites. Monumental architecture, like temples and city walls, serve both as public benefits and as propaganda, projecting the tyrant's glory. Yet the danger for tyrants was that their personal rule lacked institutional safeguards. Succession often depended on the tyrant's ability to maintain loyalty among elites and military forces. The moment a ruler appeared weak, due to illness, military defeat, or internal dissent, opponents could move swiftly to overthrow them. Many tyrannies ended violently, their rulers exiled or executed, their families scattered. The legacy of Greek tyrants is paradoxical. On one hand, they disrupted the monopolies of aristocracies and promoted public works, trade, and cultural patronage. On the other, they concentrated power in one person's hands, ruling without accountability and often resorting to repression. Later democratic Athens would remember its liberation from tyranny as a foundational moment, enshrining laws to prevent any individual from seizing sole power. Yet even in the classical era, strong men with tyrant-like authority, often backed by foreign powers, continued to emerge in unstable cities. Philosophers, too, grappled with the idea of tyranny. Herodotus and Thucydides chronicled both the excesses and achievements of tyrants. Aristotle distinguished between the tyrant, who rules for personal benefit, and the king, who rules for the benefit of his subjects. This conceptual framing influenced political thought for centuries. Tyranny in the Greek sense eventually faded as democratic and oligarchic systems became more stable, particularly in the classical and Hellenistic periods. However, the archetype of the charismatic, extra-constitutional leader, part liberator, part oppressor, remained a recurring theme in Mediterranean politics. The rise and fall of tyrants reveal much about the dynamics of Greek city-states. The fragility of political structures, the potential of popular movements, and the personal ambitions that could both elevate and imperil a community. In the end, tyranny in ancient Greece was not simply about cruelty or oppression. It was a product of its time, shaped by the interplay of social change, economic growth, and political opportunity. It reminds us that the path to power is rarely straightforward, and that those who seize it by force or cunning walk a dangerous road where the same forces that raise them up can just as quickly cast